Good evening, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to join with you, honoring the life, ministry, and the man, Sean Whaley. I posted shortly after hearing of his passing just a short message on Facebook talking about my friendship with him and what a wonderful relationship that had been over all these years. Posted some pictures of him, and those pictures were taken here in our home. He had asked me several times if there was something that he could come and build. And I would say to him, well, I'd rather you just come and spend time with us and hang out and fellowship and drink coffee. And, in Sean's mischievous way, he'd say, and talk about people. And I said, yeah, we can talk about people too. We'll just trash the whole world. And he just laughed. And I said, just come down and hang out. We'll go eat fried catfish and just have a good time. And Sean was adamant that he come and do something. He said, I want to build something in your home for you. And so we did have a project my wife wanted done, so he jumped at it, and we got everything organized and orchestrated, and he flew down. And I will tell you, it was the 4 or 5 days he was here were just wonderful. I watched him as we worked. He was laughing and cutting up and telling jokes. At the table, he was laughing and cutting up and telling jokes. With the kids, he was wrestling and playing with them, and it seemed like he adored them as much as they adored him. And that was Sean. He was always ready with a quick smile and that infectious laugh he had. And it was hard. I don't remember who it was that said it, but the statement somebody posted, I read it, that in one of the rare moments that you could get him to stop cutting up and goofing off and joking and laughing, and that was Sean. He was serious about things, but he didn't take himself too seriously. He didn't have a conversation hardly ever with me that there wasn't a laugh or a smile in there somewhere. Even in times when he walked through some pretty low valleys with the passing of his daughter. There were some intense phone calls he and I had. And somewhere, inevitably, in that phone call, Sean would find a way to find something to laugh about. And more oftentimes than not, it was himself. He laughed at himself more than anybody I ever knew. He and I had a long friendship, I guess, started around 95 or 96. And sometimes I'd make trips to Maryland, to Antioch, and I'd walk in and my shoulders would be knotted up from traveling and whatever. And I'd never say a word. He'd walk up behind me and he'd take his finger, he'd jab it right in one of those knotted up muscles, and he'd say, "Ooh, does this hurt?" And then I'd let him know that for a fact it did hurt. And he'd spend the next 20 minutes rubbing that knot out. And he had hands like vice grips and claws and just like steel. And there wasn't a knot in your shoulder he couldn't get rubbed out. But then, if you wanted to talk about the Bible, he talked about the Bible. You want to talk about what you were feeling in the Spirit? He was one of the most sensitive people I've known. Very prophetic. Very able to be sensitive to what was going on in the spirit realm around you. And, really, I guess if you were going to sum Sean up, for me anyway, I would say Sean was balanced in so many ways of his life. He could be on the platform telling you what he felt in the spirit. 2 minutes later, be down in the altar praying with someone to receive the Holy Ghost, and they would. And what a gift he had for that. I think Sean was probably as gifted a teacher as you would find, to go along with those prophetic gifts and sensitivities to the Spirit that he had. If you needed someone to go to war with you, as was seen in the Call to War videos and those who were there in the building participating, he could do spiritual warfare. He could be sensitive to the stillest, quietest voice of the Holy Ghost. He could laugh, he could build, he could tear down. He could take a piece of wood and turn it into a piece of furniture. And it's amazing to me to see how that Sean has left his fingerprints. I believe Pastor David Wright and I were talking, and he said, I look around even my own home, and Sean's fingerprints are everywhere. And here, in our home, as a part of my home, I can walk in, and upstairs and downstairs, there's 2 rooms that we added on, and his fingerprints are everywhere. These shelves behind me here, I built those, and he wanted to see a picture of them. And in true Sean fashion, when I sent him the picture, my wife wanted 3 floating shelves on either side of the fireplace. So I said, yes, ma'am. And when I sent him the pictures of them, his response was, well done, my son. Well done, my son. And that was Sean. You'd be so proud of what you'd done, and then he'd just pat you right on the head and let you know, well done, my son. He had nicknames for all of us. I don't know if he did it for everybody, but here at the Shelton house, we all had nicknames. He heard me call my wife Miss Thing one time, and the first time he heard that, that was all he ever called her from that day forward, was Miss Thing. If it was in reference to her asking me how the family was, he'd say, how's Miss Thing? And if he saw her at Antioch, he'd give her a big old hug, and he'd say, well, how are you, Miss Thing? And he was just my kids. He called Malachi, for the most part, he just labeled him Junior. And Eliana was the little princess, and Erica was Peanut. And you'd have thought that they had been crowned royalty every time he called them that. That was just right up their alley. And they affectionately then, I don't know how it got started. I told him one time I thought he put them up to it, but they began to call him Papa Whaley. And from day one, I guess maybe Eliana was the first one to start it, being the oldest. But from day one, that's all they ever called him again, was Papa Whaley. And so to Christopher and Susan, thank you for sharing him with so many of us. He was your husband and your father, and yet you made room for him to be so much to so many other people as well, and to your his grandchildren, Christopher, your children. Thank you for allowing him to fill a void here at our home after my dad passed. There are so many that have kind of stepped into that and helped, and Sean just was one of those that just helped fill that gap of sadness with laughter and joy. And so to the grandchildren, to Christopher, to Susan, thank you so very, very much from the very bottom of all of our hearts for sharing him with so many hundreds, even thousands of people across this country. Sean was fiercely loyal, and I'm trying to stay within my 10-minute allotment here, but Sean was fiercely loyal to Bishop and Mother. But I was with Brother Nichols this past weekend in Indiana, and we got to remembering stories and things about Sean. And he remembered, and I remember this vaguely, and then when he started talking about it, it came more back to my mind. But several years ago, Brother Nichols was in revival at Antioch, and after I believe it was a manifest meeting, we were going to lunch, and Brother Nichols said he was sitting in the back seat, and Sean and Bishop were up front. Well, Bishop had made a statement that morning teaching, and he said something about being humble. Well, that just wore Sean out, because he said the word is not humble, it's humility, it's humble. And Brother Wright and Sean carried that conversation on to the car, and Sean was trying to explain to him how the H on the word humble was not silent, and that intensified, and they just kept going about the difference as to whether or not it was humble or humble. And finally, after Bishop had made a particular point and said period, I don't know if it was a point blank period or just period, but Brother Nichols said he was sitting in the back seat, and all of a sudden Sean turned and looked at Bishop and leaned across the console and said, "Humility, humility," as if to drive home the point. If the H is silent in humble, then it would have to be silent in humility. And so he was letting him know just how he felt about all of that. And that was Sean. That even though Bishop thought it was humble and Sean thought it was humble, at the end of the day, you would have found nobody who was more submitted and more loyal to Bishop and Mother and the whole family, and to the church there, everybody on staff. He and Brother Johnson would go to some restaurant there, and inevitably they would go in and get the biggest 2 crab cakes you could find. And then as soon as they get back in the truck to eat them, Brother Johnson's ready to eat, and Sean took it on himself to send me torturous pictures of these massive crab cakes with just lumps of crab meat falling out of them. And he would always tag that with a little statement, "Thinking of you, Moth Pota," which was his nickname for me. And Moth Pota, according to Sean, meant man of the hour, prophet of the ages. That was what he said. So I don't know where he got that, why he started it, but that was Sean. And I remember one night, and I'm finishing up with this, but I remember one night years ago, in a very, very low point, I called him one night, and I said, "Sean, I just need you to tell me yes or no. Is it worth it? It's going to be worth it, isn't it?" And he very quickly responded, "Oh, yes, it's worth it, and it's going to be worth it." A few weeks later, one night, I don't know what was going on in his world, but he called me and he said, "Hey, I got a question for you. I need you to tell me if it's worth it and if it's going to be worth it." Yes, it's worth it, and it's going to be worth it. We were encouragement to one another, friends to one another, and I will forever remember him and miss him and be thankful for him in my life, the many ways he ministered to me, his friendship to me, and his value and his contribution to the kingdom. Only eternity will be able to tell the real story of all that God used Sean Whaley to do. And for that, I am so very thankful for him, for his ministry, for his friendship. And again, to his family, we are sorry and we weep with you in this time of loss. But thank you for sharing Sean with all of us. God bless you.